let's just say, right, for the sake of argument, that you have never had a good audio system other than stepping into your car and listening to music in there. And you decide you're going to go out and spend what you consider to be a large sum of money and get the best thing you can for that right up front. Just, you're not even going to mess around with beginnings. You just want, you go to your dealer or you go to the manufacturer and say, I want the best you have. Where would that put you? Okay, now you get it, right? You got real expensive headphones, amplifier, nice deck, right? Even maybe a separate laptop, the whole setup, right? You did all in one shot. Never before had anything like this. Think about where you would be with that, because you don't have the background. So how would you take it the first time you start listening to this?
Yeah. How would you jump into hi-fi without having the experience? Is it possible? Is it practical?
Yeah.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
But that would be the ultimate dream.
Didn't do it that way.
Yeah, none of us did it that way. So, but we see people doing it now.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare.
It's rare.
Yeah, it's rare. But it's happening. It's happening. It's probably 5% at this point. Could be 10. Don't know. Anyway, well, you could see that, though. People have money, and when they decide to do something, they do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. You see it in all kinds of things. It doesn't matter. Like if you were going to become a fisherman, right? You're going to go out to Target and buy a $20 reel, and you know what I mean? No.
If you're going to be a professional.
You're going to get the box, that comes in a box. You're going to go out, you're going to
Well, that's
say,
actually
what do I
pretty fair.
need to do this right?
Yeah.
Right?
I guess having a basic understanding of how things can be is helpful. So if you already had a baseline, you already know in another industry you're already invested in, you know that there's a lot of depth in it, and you know how important these things could be. So you know in audio, presumably it's the same way. And you wanted to reach out and say, let's extrapolate. What do I need? What should I buy?
So assuming somebody jumps right into having a nice system, honestly, I think it'd be overwhelming. Because the first time that I really heard something high-end, I did not appreciate it. I don't think I really appreciated stuff in the high-end until I had been listening to headphones for a few years. I mean, I had my collection of cheap stuff, and then I started going to Can Jams and Rocky Mountain Audio Fest and all that, and that's when I started hearing things that were, outside of my normal wheelhouse. And it wasn't until I went to a couple of those that I really started hearing kind of like the fine details and realizing, wait, this stuff is a lot better than what I use at home. But I think if I just went straight to that without that prior experience, I might not have really been able to pick up on that or appreciate them, especially with only spending a short period of time with them.
I entirely agree, and I think that is a big issue. So it's possible that someone could be the type of person that would be happy if someone just told them this is the best, run this, and they could like it. But how do you get that experience without having the experience? Because we talked about this before, but going back to an older system is almost always where you really notice what improved.
It's about contrast.
Right.
That's really what it is.
Part.
Yeah.
So if you go right into good and you never heard the bad really, I don't think you'll really appreciate it. It'll sound better, no doubt, but you won't really grasp. So how do you make that leap?
Well, I think part of it is expectations. Like, I suppose if you're reading about this for a long period of time, and you're hearing how other people are saying, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard type thing. And then you go and you duplicate what they're doing, and you're like, and you've never done it before.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't really get it. And it's true, you might not get it. You might be bowled over too. It could go either way, but we've seen some people go, well, I'm not really hearing this.
Yeah, I guess it goes one way or the other, really. And when you go right to the top, it's either like it meets all your expectations, exceeds your expectations, and you're like, this is the greatest I've ever heard, or you're like, indifferent.
I think the biggest issue is you have to have a baseline understanding of what your current experience doesn't offer you. If you don't have any headphones, you've never really used any headphones other than stock earbuds or something like that, unless you have an exhaustive understanding of what they don't do, I don't think you'll be amazed jumping right into a $20,000 system or whatever.
But I think over time, like if you give that system a few weeks, depends. Everyone's different. Could be a few days, few weeks, few months. And really what people need to understand at that level is it's almost like a quick lesson. You're almost trying to take 4 years of college in a month, right? Because, most people will spend a few years to build up to a system like that. So you got to, the first line of recommendation would be give it time. Don't sit down and go, in the first 10 minutes, this is this way or that way, because it ain't. All right, your brain has no idea what it's hearing right now. It's overwhelmed with sonic information that it's never put together before. You know.
Well, I mean, yeah, because if you go the traditional approach and you keep adding new components and you know what each one did as you add them, instead of just like, all right, this is the best everything, and so you don't really know what's doing what, and you don't really know anything. You just, this is what it is.
It's
you
like
know?
leapfrogging from point A to point B without seeing anything in between.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be like traveling the country. It's like you could snap your fingers and go from New York to California, and then someone asks you, well, what was it like?
Yeah.
You couldn't, there's no description, right?
It's a lot harder
you
to
can't
appreciate
say.
it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the difference starting out with a few $100 car, every panel's rusted, it barely runs. And then you start to move up, and you more or less fully appreciate typically what the superior benefits are of a higher end vehicle. You really understand, you get it, right? But if you just start out with a nice car and that's all you've ever known, you wouldn't really understand the benefit it provides you. You would think, oh, I could just get a cheap one. What's the difference, right?
Until you go back, which
you go
a
back.
few videos ago we talked about going back. Yeah,
Yeah.
You get like a used 20-year-old Chevy and go
Yeah.
on that, and then you'll know the difference between the two.
It's like, yep, you got to use a screwdriver to the carb sticks, you know?
Yeah,
You
not to
gotta
pick
like
on
flip this switch.
not to pick on Chevy. It could have been anything, but
Could
the
be
point
anything,
it could have
yeah.
been a 20-year-old Honda. But
Any
the point is,
old cheap garbage car
Yeah,
that's
right.
falling apart.
Yeah.
It's the same thing pretty much.
yeah, right. It's like,
They're
oh my
terrible.
God. Yeah, it's like
They
you
work,
start to
but-
realize it. You know.
Yeah, I've had my fair share of those.
Yeah.
This is still something that you see though in people with experience too. I mean, you guys do this when, we got a new secret sauce piece of gear and we've all been testing it out, an amplifier, right? And you guys each are spending, like several weeks with it before you really share any opinions on it with each
That's
other,
true.
Like everybody takes their time with it. The same thing with me whenever I get a piece of gear and it's like I got to use it for, weeks, sometimes months before I'm really comfortable telling people what I think about it. And we're all people that have a lot of experience with audio and it still takes us time.
Yeah, we've learned not to jump to conclusions. That's one of the things experience teaches you.
Yep. Every
Because-
time you eventually, like, only a week later, you're like, my initial impressions,
Yeah.
they're not what I thought.
And if you say that publicly, it's like sticking your foot in your mouth every
Yeah.
time, because you're gonna you at some point you learn that you need to learn about it, more about it, and you see that a lot too with beginning reviewers sometimes, guys that have only been doing reviews for maybe a year or two or something like that. You've probably seen that on YouTube too, right, Douglas? With the
Oh yeah.
you start and you look at them and they're going, oh, they got this totally wrong.
I mean, I did that. There are headphones that I reviewed in the first year, maybe 2 years of my channel, and now 5-6 years on, I look back at it and I'm like, oh God, what was I talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, YouTube in particular, like all channels are like that. Channels that are huge now, you go back and they started like 8-10 years ago, and you look at they don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and now you couldn't tell now looking at the videos, everything's so polished.
Some of them probably wish they could start the channel over.
Yeah,
again.
they're like, I don't even want to watch the old stuff.
Can I get rid of the old stuff and
Yeah.
just
Everyone
yeah.
talks about
Yeah.
it, right?
I removed a handful of old videos because I was like, I don't agree with this review anymore. Doesn't
Right.
apply now.
Well, it makes sense, particularly if it's no longer valid. Like the product no longer exists to purchase anyway. It doesn't matter.
I find in the really short term situations though, like if I say somebody comes over and I really want to show them what a high end headphone sounds like, that contrast really helps. So I'll have them wear something cheap first, like $150 headphone, and let them listen to that for 5-10 minutes, and then I'll be like, all right, now try this. And that immediate switch, that usually it doesn't yield the final result of oh, I get it.
Right.
But a lot of times people are like, oh, wow, this is pretty different.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
That would work
And
if
it's
you-
not always, but, for a really just quick trying to get somebody to experience it, that contrast has always helped me a little bit.
Yeah, and I found that with everything in audio over the decades. It's the same with trying new power cords or cables or an amplifier, or DACs. It's been like this going on for decades, where people will pop something in the system and go, I don't really hear it.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, okay, well, give it a few weeks. Okay, well, it's not worth it to me. I'll take it out. Then when they take it out, then all of a sudden there's a hole in the sound, it doesn't sound the same anymore. And they're thinking about it for days, why doesn't it sound anymore? And then that's the beginning of getting it, It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
I've used this example before, but yeah, the OLED TVs, it's like the best picture you can get currently, And I showed my friend, and he's like, "Yeah, looks like my LCD, you know." And he didn't realize until he went home and turned his LCD on. Then it's like, oh, actually, yeah, this is. Then he did buy a new OLED TV after
Yeah.
that. But
It's like that in everything.
Yeah.
People oftentimes come into an industry or a thing expecting to be wowed by the high end. And usually it's underwhelming. Usually, especially if there's some time between you had the last experience with that thing, you try the new, greatest, hottest thing and you think, it's good, but it's not much better than what I have at home. Then you go back to what you have at home, you come to realize, oh, actually, it did this. And the other thing did that or whatever. It kind of helps piece it together. I think the contrast is really profound and it's shocking, but it seems almost everyone needs it. If you don't have the experience, if you don't have crazy experience, you practically need to have the contrast to really grasp because there's things that changed that you've never seen change before. So you're not really tuned in to noticing them. It's really hard to detect because you've never seen it before. You've never
Yeah.
heard it before.
I've seen people at shows though that are the opposite. They're like, "Oh man, now I got to go home and listen to my crap." You know,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
like they know that it's like,
Yeah.
Well, they probably
Yeah.
were at a few shows,
They're,
but
in,
it really
they're in the
takes
middle
a
of the
lot.
road somewhere. They've already
Yeah.
been down.
Yeah.
They've already driven enough where they know that what they're dealing with.
yeah,
You know, and that's the thing. I mean, really, you know, what it boils down to is it's not. We're not saying, well, you know, if you can afford it, don't jump right in.
yeah,
All right. Just that if you do, and you find yourself in a position where you're underwhelmed, give it time. Use it for a month or so. You know, get used to it. You know, and then it's possible that there's something within that system that needs to be adjusted for you, for your tastes, for your music, and then you approach that. Once you have a base of experience with the existing system and you played all kinds of music and you know what even the stuff you want, right? Then you can move on and go, okay, go back to whoever you purchased from. Go, all right, well, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. See, now you're on a path. Now you know where you're going. It takes time though, so you know it does take time, but you know, but same token, like if we have a lot of guys coming from the 2-channel world who've had speakers their whole lives, and now they're getting into headphones, you know, and they tend to be older. You know, they tend to be in the older class where they don't have the space for the speakers, whatever reason, or they just wanted to have something at night to play. But those guys are experienced from 2-channel, and usually they'll drop right into what we're doing in the headphone side of things.
Well,
Usually,
they have the electronics probably already that they can use. So
at
that
least the
helps.
front end, the
Yeah.
back, yeah. But they're experienced in listening to music. They've gone through things and changes over the years, you know, with systems, so they understand what amps can do and DACs can do. So that's a huge part of the battle. If you've already been in audio, you know, then it's a huge part of the battle. You already understand it.
I think one thing that tends to be a bit shocking to me is how experience in most industries carries over. And it doesn't really necessarily make sense. You wouldn't think it would, but you could be into photography, super deep into photography, and you could really understand all the nuances of the different hardware and whatever, methods, techniques, different past experiences of people or whatever. And it kind of oftentimes helps you in audio to understand the differences that can exist. You could understand and appreciate things faster oftentimes just
That's
by
true.
having an in-depth experience in almost anything.
Yeah, that's kind of true because you understand there's nuance involved as you move up, and you expect that when you're looking at the higher end of anything. You know, like cars, photography.
Yeah, it's like a little kickstart, basically. If you're
Yeah.
very familiar with cars, you're
Yeah.
very familiar with anything.
you
really.
kind of know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, you got an idea. You know, I would say even you could jump even into like buying homes and stuff, or
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
you're suddenly looking at details that you never really would have paid attention to in the past.
Right.
You know, and you're like, I don't really like the way they built this one or that room or this, and it's funny how it does. And then again, there's a whole different learning curve involved with each of those, but it's quicker if you have a subset of knowledge on how things build around you, like how you build to getting to the top, the best of the best. It helps. It helps you get a better eye, a better, you know what I mean? You focus more on stuff.
Well, and you know how to like have better pointed questions to other people, so you can ask them to
Right.
find out more
What you don't
in
know.
line with what you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think somebody that has a lot of in-depth experience, they're a hobbyist in multiple different spaces, and they're just getting into audio, I think they would be very quick to get into audio. It isn't crazy complicated in the grand scheme of things, but it does have very different terminology, and you need to experience it really to appreciate it, like pretty much anything. So unfortunately, if you have no experience and you're used to plugging stock earbuds into a phone dongle, it's going to be a long time. I think years probably to really understand and appreciate high-end audio.
Yeah, but you got to start somewhere. So at some point, when you're bored with that, move on. Try the next step. See where it takes you.
Well, it seems like a lot of people like lurk on like forums for like a year or two before they even want to like say anything, get a base knowledge,
Which is fine.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, I've been here for 2 years, but nobody knows that.
So I think that kind of covers, in general, like we wanted to, for people that can have the means to jump right in, just expect it to. But there's still a learning curve involved. There's a learning curve to everything, and just let it roll, let it go, and you'll see how it pans out over time.
It's like a fine wine.
Yeah, it's like
It's
a
got to
fine
simmer
wine.
with time.
Yeah.
Doesn't simmer.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it kind of sort of vaguely rhymed.
Yeah, it's like that. Or whiskey, they like whiskey. So you're always looking for the age, rums and bourbons.
Well, plenty of people could drink a super expensive bottle of wine that everyone says is the greatest thing ever. And wow, it's got this savory undertone of something, something, something. And if they have no experience, they'll be like, I don't know what you're
That is
talking
true.
about.
Wine is a
Give me
good
my
example.
$7 box wine.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah,
happy.
if you have no experience with drinking any wines, then yeah, here's a $500 bottle of wine. You'd probably be like,
Yeah.
it's fine.
I remember years ago I used to go out with some guys at the shows, and they used to be into wines. They were from California. Whether they knew what Napa tasted like, and I'm like, I could give a crap about wine, but okay, I'll try it. And to me at first it was like, it wouldn't matter to me. It was a $50 or $500 bottle.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, if you have enough of those tastes, where I'll have a sip of it just to
Yeah.
try it. All of a sudden, you start to get a base of knowledge on it, and you're like, oh, now I can kind of see the difference.
Some
between-
data points.
Yeah, like one tastes like vinegar, and the other one
Well,
doesn't.
that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah.
It just gets like that, where it's like,
But
oh,
you could see how it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because sometimes you're happy with the cheap and you don't really value the high end enough to bother getting into it, and maybe that works for you. I think people will tend to enjoy the high end more, but it's not a huge amount. It's only a little bit nicer. So if you're not into audio, probably doesn't make any sense to get a super high end audio system. You probably won't get enjoyment out of it. But if you're into audio, if you like listening to music, like quite a lot of people are, I think even if right now you're hesitant, probably you will eventually get more enjoyment out of a high end system. Most people do.
so there in itself is a good enough reason to bust up and buy the best headphone system you can.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, at least at that time.
Yeah.
Go for it. What the hell you got to lose? Worst case scenario is you go, I need to spend more money.
Right.
On that note, everybody, please subscribe to us. We always got good content coming. Take care of yourselves. Thanks.